So today I found out that Poundland sells books. For those of you unfamiliar with her work, basically Poundland is a shop where every single item is £1, which means these brand new books are being sold for £1, which is cheaper than charity shops, it's cheaper than buying secondhand. And you know, this got me thinking, how bad does a book have to be for it to be sold for less than it costs to manufacture? And who is reading these books? Who is putting themselves through that? The answer is me. I'm going to read books from Poundland. So I did some Googling and basically there's a walk that I can do that will take me to 6 whole Poundlands. That's a Poundland crawl. Granted, it's not quite as cool as a bar crawl, but I think we've established at this point, I am not cool. I think we gave up on being cool a long time ago on this channel. That ship has sailed. That ship has sunk. I'm not Jack Edwards, I'm Jack from Titanic. Also, like, not to get political, but there was definitely room for Jack on that door in Titanic. I'm just saying. Anyway, let's get cracking and let's head to Poundland. Okay, here we are, the mothership. My face mask kind of muffled my voice in these clips, so I'm going to voice over instead. I went to all 6 Poundlands to check out their selection. There were some questionable autobiographies, some more niche than others. There was also Finding Colin Firth. That was a real highlight. Sideline is about a woman who kidnaps a 15-year-old boy by the Thames and then keeps him hostage in her house. Love Virtually was an online love story. 2 Weeks Notice, right here, had a horrible cover, and so obviously I wanted both of them. I was, though, pleasantly surprised to find The Great Gatsby for only £1 and John Ronson's non-fiction writing, which is great, so that's a bargain. The Knickerbocker Glory Years is about a man who's been hungry since the day he was born, which is, you know, relatable. The Emoji Movie Book, The Knackered Mother's Wine Club, and in the words of DJ Khaled, another one. This Poundland had their books kind of behind a cage, which I thought was quite strange. It's like they actually don't want you to read them. And then I found this. This is Jane Eyre Laid Bare. Wow. I want to buy this one because I think it'll be so funny, but equally, I can't go up to the till. I'm so embarrassed. Okay, I'm home. We've got a bag of goods, all terribles. And I don't know if the pandemic has just completely warped my perception of fun, but I had quite a nice time. And I have made a presentation to let you know about today's sponsor, which is Surfshark. Surfshark is a VPN, which stands for Virtual Private Network. Nice. So it basically keeps your online identity safe by encrypting all of the information sent from your computer to the internet. For example, when you use public Wi-Fi, hackers might try and get you, but fear not because Surfshark keeps you safe. Oh no. You can also swap your location so you can travel virtually on the internet. How 2021 is that? And there's thousands of servers in 65 countries. For example, UK Netflix doesn't have Harry Potter, but you can change your location to Turkey and just like magic, there she is. You're a wizard, Surfshark. Now, Surfshark does not track what you do online, and they've very generously given us a, wait for it, 83% discount. 83%! Plus, you can get your first 3 months free using the code Jack Edwards. There he is, that's my name, and you can do that using the link down below. Surfshark has a 30-day money-back guarantee, so there's no risk in signing up, and your personal data is protected, and so is your money. Thank you, Surfshark. I'd hug you, but social distancing. And now onto the first book. Okay, I finished the first book and that was this one. This is Fly on the Wall by E. Lockhart. I mean, the cover is really quite something. And believe it or not, this is actually a modern retelling of Franz Kafka's classic novel, The Metamorphosis. And The Metamorphosis is basically a book about a guy who wakes up one morning and he is a giant bug. This book kind of rewrites that, and it's about a teenage girl called Gretchen. And one day she's talking to her best friend and she's like, I wish I could be a fly on the wall in the boys' changing room. And you know what the Pussycat Dolls said? Be careful what you wish for, because you just might get it. And she does. She wakes up the next morning as a literal fly on the wall. Yes, this is one of the most ridiculous books I've ever read. You know, it is good fun, but I feel like this is a classic example of when an author writes a quirky main character, but forgets to make them likable. For example, someone she's got a big fat crush on asks her, hey, what's up? Her answer is, oh, with me? The usual. Random acts of violence, media saturation, teenage angst, utter mayhem. Like, what? I just think sometimes authors forget to give them redeeming features so we actually root for them. The other thing I found just a little bit strange is the fact that because this whole book basically takes place in the boys' changing room from the perspective of Gretchen as a fly, it's essentially a deep dive into male friendships, male relationships, male communication, but written by a woman, and I felt like there was a kind of disconnect there. To give it credit, it does address male body image, bullying, homophobia, and it kind of discusses how to cool things out when you're with your mates and create a less toxic environment. I thought that was cool, but to me, it still felt kind of contrived and forced, and very much from the perspective of someone who hasn't been in a male changing room. Probably the worst thing is that, given that there's a lot of male nudity, because it's a changing room in this book, it refers to penises as gherkins, throughout the whole novel, and I will never look at a McDonald's cheeseburger the same way ever again. She also calls boobs biscuits. It's too much. Get that fire exit door. I'm off. This author, E. Lockhart, also wrote We Were Liars, which is light years better. You can definitely tell the growth as an author from this book to that one. And I'm actually talking about We Were Liars in next week's video, so subscribe for that. Anyways, this was by no means one of the best books I've ever read, but it is good fun. And yeah, that was Fly on the Wall. Book number 2 is this one. This is Jane Eyre, Laid Bare. This is the classic novel with an erotic twist. I'll give you a second to just process that. And it's by Yves Sinclair, and I cannot believe the audacity of them to put Miss Charlotte Bronte's name on this book. The Lion, the Witch, and the audacity of this bitch. They really said, R.I.P. Charlotte Bronte, you would have loved Jane Eyre, Laid Bare. And if you want the nerdy publishing industry details, well, I'll give them to you. The reason that Charlotte Bronte's name is on the cover of this book is because of UK copyright laws. Essentially, after an author has been dead for 70 years, their work enters the public domain, which is why all of George Orwell's books have recently entered the public domain, because he died in 1950. Anyway, this book is basically Jane Eyre, copy and pasted, but with some added sexy bits. Let's just say it's very obvious where Charlotte Bronte's writing ends and Yves Sinclair's writing begins, because Yves Sinclair is not Charlotte Bronte. We have Jane Eyre masturbating with a candle, we have homoerotica, we have saucy scenes between Jane and Mr. Rochester, and Heinz, if you're watching. I'm sure you are, I know you're a big fan of the Jack Edwards channel. Heinz Ketchup, you've got competition, because this book is saucy. There are some iconic moments in here because they're so ridiculous. But my favorite scene has to be where Rochester gives Jane a Brazilian trim. He shaves her Jane hair. Oh my god, and later on when they have sex on a horse. What? I wish I was joking. You know, when I started this channel in 2015, I never saw myself one day reviewing erotica on here, but it's the range for me. YouTube has taken me down some weird avenues, but this takes the cake. This takes the whole bakery. And yes, I was embarrassed taking this up to the counter in Poundland, but I owned it. And I think I'm gonna have to own adding this to my Goodreads account with no context as well. Anyway, that was Jane Eyre, Laid Bare. I have a degree in literature. The next book I read was this one. This is 2 Weeks Notice by Rachel Caine, and honestly, it felt like it took me 2 weeks to read because it was so boring. It's a book about people who are dead, but they've been revived back to life by a drug. The drug is called Doornail, and that's a real taster as to how imaginative the rest of this book is. Because these people died, they are now dependent on this drug to stay alive, so they have to take a daily dose of the drug. And throughout the book, they're referred to as addicts, which I just felt like was quite a weird term for people who literally depend on this drug to stay alive. Like, would we call people with diabetes addicts because they need insulin? Probably not. I can't say I really blamed them for taking a drug that kept them alive. Like, if they don't take Doornail, they basically start decomposing. That's unpleasant for everyone involved. Anyway, by the end of the book, there are zombies who are different to the revived people somehow. Oh, and the main character turns into a cannibal. It's a wild ride. So instead of taking daily doses of the drug, she just eats human flesh instead. And apparently that's a better alternative. Again, literally no likable characters, and they just spent the whole time whinging, and I thought, you know, if you've been brought back to life by this magical miracle drug, I'd go to Bali, I'd go skydiving, I'd be living my best life. What are you doing fighting crime? The main plot twist is that our main character is bonking a man called Patrick, and at the end of the book, this zombie turns up called Jane, and Jane is Patrick's ex-wife who he thought died like 10 years ago. Dun dun dun! I don't know what would be more horrifying, bumping into someone and realizing they're a zombie, or realizing they're your ex. 2 Weeks Notice is one of those classic thriller books where it sort of just makes up the plot as it goes along. There are so many unresolved character arcs and themes, and I just thought it was an absolute snooze fest. This was not for me, and I hate the cover. This cover triggers my fight or flight response. That's horrible. So this was not a win. This was not good, but it was only £1, so I can't really complain. And I'll see you for the next one. Dead as a Doornail was the last £1 book that I read, and I think this is an accurate price for this book. The title does what it says on the tin. This is Dead as a Doornail. I was bored. In fairness, it turns out this was part 5 in a series, and that's very much on me. That is my mistake, not the books. The story opens with a girl called Suki, and her brother has just turned into a were-panther. Like a werewolf, but with a little bit of spice. So he's half man, half panther. But there's also a were-tiger. You know, we've got a bit of were-diversity going on. I think I'd be a were-koala. I have the koalifications. So Suki is like, okay, not ideal that my brother is now a were-panther, but it's not a total shock to her. Like, she's dealt with the supernatural before because she's telepathic. However, there's a twist. Trouble in supernatural paradise, because there's a shooter in town who is gunning, quite literally, for the brethren. And all the were creatures believe that it's Suki's brother who is actually the shooter because he's bitter about the fact that he is now a werepanther. And I'm not gonna lie, I don't think being a werewolf or werecreature is that much of an inconvenience. Like, it's only every full moon. Like, I feel like it's, of all the problems to have, it's pretty manageable. You know, I think as a kid, the fear of one day becoming a werewolf was a lot scarier than it has actually turned out to be in adult life. Anyway, back to the novel. Sookie is having her hot girl summer. Literally every man who comes into her vicinity is obsessed with her, and she can tell because she can read their minds, but she doesn't really get with any of them. I think Charlene Harris was like, okay, he's read Jane Eyre laid bare. Let's give him some time off. This guy needs a break. And ultimately, the big twist is that Sookie's house gets burnt down and then she gets shot. Like, this girl cannot catch a break. And yeah, to be honest, £1 is the perfect price for this book. Don't you think it kind of looks like something that should come free with like a newspaper or something? It wasn't for me, but you know what? It could be your cup of tea, it could be your whole kettle. And that is the last of my Poundland book haul. Which one of these was the best? Which one was the least bad? Maybe Fly on the Wall, actually. I think we peaked quite early on. I mean, obviously we do also have some writing from actual Charlotte Bronte, but I feel like we're not counting that. And yeah, I think the conclusion here is that Poundland books are worth about £1. They're perfectly priced, they know their own limits, they know their own lane, and they stay in it, and they're cruising in their lane. You know, these were aggressively average, but they recognize their own mediocrity, so how can you criticize them? Maybe that's something I need to start doing more of. Maybe I could learn something here. Anyways, thank you so much for watching this video. Thank you to Surfshark for sponsoring it. I really, really appreciate it. And you can, of course, download Surfshark down below and get a whopping 83% off and 3 months free. So click the link and have a lovely day. I will see you next time. Bye-bye, and subscribe.